This is a production of Cornell University.
So today we're fortunate enough to have Dr. Kyle Wickings, one of our entomologists here at Cornell, to talk about annual bluegrass weevil spring emergence, scouting. For all those in the chat box, there's a link to a new resource that Kyle helped develop with our New York State Golf BMP project. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that today. But let's get it started. Frank, I'll give it off to you for some opening remarks, and then we'll get Kyle's thoughts on things.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Carl. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, good for now.
Okay, so here we are, week 2. I'm going to try to keep us distracted for a little while and just start out by saying if you got these kinds of projects that the Bethpage folks have been working on through the wintertime and you're able to work and it's safe to work, these are not such bad things to take up right now because, as I'm going to tell you, we're not going anywhere fast, at least as the weather indicates. And so just again, happy to have you all with us. Thanks to Kyle and, of course, to Carl for being the sort of rod that stirs the coffee, as we say, and really bringing us all together so we can get some information on how to deal with this in our professional lives. Okay, first, let me just say, as a member of Cornell University, really happy and honored to be part of an institution where we can continue to do this, provides us the opportunities to do this. Take care of yourself. They say stay at home if it's possible. Please do that. We hope the economic worries don't trump your health and everything else. Sorry for the pun there. But that we hope that you're keeping yourself safe. We're really fortunate now within a week, the major golfing organizations have come out with really good guidance on these issues. Now, I'm going to take issue with some of the things they say, but overall, man, this is what real leadership looks like. Big kudos to Adam Miller at the USGA, Red Evans, and all the folks at GCSA pulling this off, even setting the lead for the playing end of this. The PGA of America is linking to the GCSA site. Now, there's already reports across the country of operations where someone's got a positive. And so I would immediately encourage you to check out this section of the GCSA website to keep you informed about how to deal with this. This is a serious situation, and if you don't plan for it, you don't have worry. Some guys are, okay, I got to get hours, so you got 5 days, 10 hours a week, and the mechanic works at night, right? You got to have split crews. If somebody gets a positive, there's a whole lot of things that can happen. Here's a really good piece of information for where you can start with understanding this. This is really, really great. Now, where are they playing golf? Well, they're playing golf in all but 12 states, including Alaska right now. We in New York State, there are orders that you can play, but some local restrictions. It's the patchwork nature of the United States that concerns me the most about this. I feel it's a sort of a long-term effort to decentralize a fair amount of things, and this is what happens when you need some centralization. So again, big kudos to the USGA and GCSA for taking the leadership on this, but this does wreak havoc, particularly for those of you on borders of places. You're running a business on the border of these operations. You're closed, somebody else is open, economic as well as health worry. So thankfully, again, there's guidance on this. The PGA of America and the European sources are providing safe ways to play. I'm sure you, as golf course superintendents, as assistants, it's critical. If you're on the site, you're the facility leader there. You are one of the few essential people. You notice they're shutting the clubhouse. They're shutting the pro shops. You may be considered one of the only people who can go in and do work. This is what's happening in the UK and Ireland, where only the greenkeeper can go to work with a piece of paper saying, here's what they're going to do, and here's why they're going to do it, and here's why it's essential. So my advice, while we still are in the waiting of a lot of this in New York State, that we prepare fully. All right. This was a nice little question that got asked the other day by the USGA, and not long after that, minimal maintenance standards came out, and this is where lots of questions remain. This is where, if I was a golf course superintendent or anybody in course management that's responsible for making the decisions of caring for the property, I would be sure to review this. Now, I can take issue with a lot of these things. You read some of these things like irrigation, equipment maintenance that was done maybe in the wintertime, irrigation, lots of interesting things here. The RNA actually put out a little bit more detailed one that I like. There's a little bit more here that's like irrigating to keep the turf alive, right? Irrigating to keep, not to necessarily provide playing conditions, right? So where are we in keeping the turf alive relative to weather, right? Because we're going to get to whether you're playing or not in a minute. But right now, it seems like it's encroaching in the Pittsburgh area and as you move to the south. So right now, soil temperatures still remain fairly cool. For much of the Northeast, you're barely creeping into the 50s in Long Island and the New York metropolitan areas, upper 40s, low 50s. The air temperature continues to be below normal, and you see the same wave of weather that just came through. We're at or below normal in a lot of places. Now, what is forecasted? Well, the good place to look for data, and I've been stressing, use data in this situation. The good place to look for data is our forecast website. We have all this information there, and this is indicating, at least from a Northeast Climate Center, that R.D. Gaetano, our shortcut weather expert, is telling us we're going to accumulate very little growing degree days for the next coming week, right? So until April 6th, we're really planning on not a big move in the weather. Now, when we think about weather, when we think about data, we go back to some of these data things that maybe, growth potential, I just watch and look at the bucket. I don't weigh clippings. I don't think. Well, now it's a good time to start thinking about, my air temperature looks like it's upper 40s. That's indicating I'm at 15% growth potential. So that's indicating even if I throw tons of N, it's not going anywhere, right? The plants aren't growing. We're not going anywhere, right? We have time in many cases. Now, here's where it gets tricky. If you're at a place where they're nutball 250 rounds a day, 15,000 carts on the golf course, and it's all of a sudden between the hash marks at Lambeau Field, between the 20s and between the hash marks, and you got a race course going on out there, man, protecting the asset means keeping up with it if you can. But if you're in a place where play is scaling back, and you're not getting much play, or you're getting some, but it's no different. You don't see any wear marks in the pinch points. You don't see anything happening yet, even though the plants really aren't growing. You're in a good position. So you should be modulating the decisions you're making on your golf course based on traffic and growth, right? That's the governing body right now. And again, at our forecast website, one of the things that, maybe twitching to want to do, if you didn't do it in the fall, or if you're an embark person, you can go to our forecast website, type in your zip code, and we have a lot of predictive models. We've had them there for a decade. Now, we certainly want to update this more and more, but what I like about this is we're telling you pretty much till the 7th of April, right, in upstate, in much of northern New York, except for the metro area, you got time for proxy, right? Embark is still coming. A lot of you still use Embark, but these kinds of models are good to look at so you can deem when I really need to go in and do something. Monitor these tools to keep up with what you got to do if you can't get to work because you're quarantined. Right? Here's a good example. This is, again, for the Northeast region, and you see down the side here is the predictive model. So you get this customized for you. Big kudos to R.D. Gaetano. All right, I'm wrapping up. And I want to wrap up by first saying, okay, where are we early season disease-wise, right? Well, we saw some early season anthracnose on some golf courses early, and there was a twitch to want to go spray. I was more of the opinion, and generally are of the opinion, in promoting herd immunity. You're getting anthracnose lingering over from last year. You're getting some early season anthracnose now. I've seen many cases that does not develop the full season anthracnose. Why don't you let those plants go? We got more and more guys letting plants go with the weevils to bring in other plants, be they POA or bent, but something that can tolerate this problem, this management that you're doing. Now's the time to be looking at that. Microdochium conditions are up there. It's unlikely you're going to get death. high value areas, you obviously want to look at your fungicide options. Pythium root rot, ugh, right? You already got Pythium root rot. We're soaked, the soils are saturated. I'm not of the opinion we should be running out there. Man, I'm feeling like I'm Horton Hears a Who again. Everything I see in the mainstream industry is saying, hey, go, go, go. I understand that to some level. But if some of these problems are structural, why not start that conversation about, look, this is what I'm dealing with every year, even when you're not out there, right? I still think we have plenty of time until root pathogen drenches are needed. And then, so thank you. I don't know, Carl, if you want to do some questions here or pivot right to Kyle. I want to make sure Kyle also talks and promotes this wonderful resource, because people in the lawn and landscape, we told them a little bit about this. You may see some grubs out there, might be some good time to identify those things. So Carl, I'll pass it back to you, brother. I'll stop sharing here.
All right. So no questions. No questions so far on kind of that growing season update. So I think what we can do is, Kyle, we can get your thoughts. You can share your screen and give us a little more insight on the ABW issue. I noticed some names down here on the participant list, Long Island, others from different parts of the country who may not have much experience with ABW. So I'll hand it off to you.
Sure, that sounds good. Thanks, Frank and Carl, for having me. And yeah, I think just since you flashed that grub key up, it's worth mentioning that just looking at soil temperatures here, I think most of what I've been seeing actually a little earlier than that still. So where I am in the Finger Lakes, we've still got 40-degree soil temperatures, so they're quite low. And but that really hasn't stopped things like white grubs and crane flies coming back up. They're active right now, so we've got them all in the root zone. We've got birds and mammals going after them right now as well. So so they're there and they're feeding. But again, what we talk about and what you'll see in this key for management recommendations for grubs, this is a window to really, the only thing you need to do right now is mark where those areas are and just keep them in mind. They're good areas to check out if you did a fall application, curative application for white grubs, to see what type of winter success you had or winter mortality, but that's about it. So no real need to worry about and panic about white grubs at this point. So just keeping an eye on how things look is the way to go, but they're back for sure. Crane flies are another story. Some folks try to do for things like the European crane fly, spring curative applications. We're still a bit early for that. Things are still too cold. The numbers aren't as high as they'll get. And so we're still early for that as well, at least a month out for that sort of thing. But if you're looking out there, I'm sure you're seeing some vertebrate damage. And I don't know, Carl, if we had that question, go up there in the poll. But that's something that, at least in the Finger Lakes area, I'm seeing quite a lot of vertebrate damage, including at my own house. Flickers and skunks and everything else all over the place, just tearing stuff up. So, but again, temperatures are low for soils, so that's something I was surprised to see. Those predictions having us in the mid to high 40s to even 50s. I'm not actually seeing that in both the southern tier or in the upper part of the Finger Lakes area. So still quite cool. Moving on a bit to talk about annual bluegrass weevil. This is one that we've been starting to scout for already because of some of the changes at Cornell. We've been slow to get our degree day monitors up and running, but we have been doing vacuum sampling to scout for annual bluegrass weevil. So Carl, you made a good point that not everybody's necessarily got annual bluegrass weevil on their radar or is managing them or is used to scouting for them. So Frank had suggested I put some slides together to just show sort of the general overview of the life cycle and kind of where we're at. So I can do that now. Just give me a second here to share my screen.
And I always think it's a good refresher, Kyle. I mean, I think now that we're in uncertain times with what we're going to be allowed to do, understanding the way these little guys are, because we don't have the same flexibility. If you're down to 2 guys, you can't think, well, I'll just spray. You do have an alleviation that you don't have to worry about golfers maybe as much. Some do. But I think by understanding some of the basics of these things, you might think differently about how you'd strategize at a time that actually you can justify as minimal, right? As minimal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And just Carl, I just want to let you know that it looks like you, as the host, have your screen share for participants disabled. So I'm not able to share mine for some reason, but we can certainly do this without the screen share. It's just a bunch of goofy cartoons I put together.
No, I'll, let's see. I'm going to allow you to, I'm going to make you a host and
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
make
get
you
the
co-host.
technology. We'll get the
Pass me the ball
technology
now.
figured out.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
Now
There
let's
we
see.
go. Okay. Now I got to show you this goofy slide that I put together.
There we go. Nice.
Okay. All right. You guys got the presenter view or the audience view of that?
Looks good here. That looks like audience
Looks good
view.
here.
Okay,
Good here.
great. So in typical Dr. Wickings fashion, I always use way to just kind of illustrate where things are at and the general life cycle. So for those who aren't familiar with this, annual bluegrass weevil overwinters in our natural areas on courses. This can be anything from tree lines to shrub lines to taller grass that just has a lot of duff and leaf litter left on it. Anywhere you get that buffering climate and protective microclimate. So typically, where we are in November through March, this is where the adults are spending their winter. So we're really trying to pick up on the movement of the adults out of these areas on our courses. So, you know, typically as spring progresses, you'll get March through May, this progression towards the shorter mown turf. This is fairways, tees, greens, collars, all of that. And we're really trying to tap into this point. Where are the adults along that spectrum of that space and movement? And that's really critical if we're looking at doing adulticide applications. And a lot of folks are really focused on adulticides and focusing on managing adults, and really knowing where the adults are is pretty critical to doing that. So there was a blog post on the Weevil Track blog by Ben McGraw. He's been getting a number of calls from people asking, can I do something now? You know, we're short-staffed. We're trying to find things preventatively that we can do to save us later. Can we do management against any bluegrass weevil adults now? And just like the story with crane flies and grubs, it's just too early. So our scouting essentially is putting us here for adult movement. We're seeing them outside of the native areas or the natural areas. They're active and they are moving, but we're really not seeing that progression and that stacking up towards the edge of the roughs near the fairways and greens and stuff that we're looking for. So activity is still way, way back here. If you're really focused on phenological indicators, those are lagging as well. We're seeing some activity, but even things like forsythia down in the southern tier of New York are just starting to break buds and get some foliage on it. So we're not really seeing anything near the start of activity, even with those indicators around here. So I've seen some blog posts downstate showing that they've got things like forsythia developing much, much quicker, but that it's a bit disconnected with the movement of adult weevils right now. So in a nutshell, holding off for now. Now, this isn't a great time to try and encourage people to take on new practices like scouting, but if you've got the ability and you're thinking of trying to do anything, the main thing that you could do right now is try to get a sense for where on your course the weevils are. So if you know you've got some problem areas from past years, doing some scouting in those areas to see where along this trajectory you've got the weevils is a really great way to give you some peace of mind and a heads up on what to think about moving forward for if you are going to do an adulticide application. So I can show the screenshot of our BMP to show the web address for that in a bit, but just as a general sense for how we do our scouting, this, say, for example, is an area where we have had a historical problem. What we'll do is vacuum sampling in bands going from the natural area or native area or whatever that transitional edge where we think they're overwintering out to the playing surface. So we'll take vacuum passes in these areas. Ours are about 20 feet apart, 20 to 30 feet long, and we'll basically try to pick up on that wave where the adult weevils are. And that's your best indication of when you should be thinking about doing adulticide applications, when you've got adults all kind of stacked up along this edge out here. So, but again, we're essentially right back here in central New York. We're nowhere near that point. So way too early. Best thing you can do if you've got the ability to do it is get out there and do a little bit of scouting. So if you don't have a vacuum sampler, using soapy flushes in areas like this is a really great way to do that as well. So it's a much, much cheaper way to go about it if you don't have the resources right now to tackle it. So if anybody's interested in doing that, looks like I got my screen up. There we go. So we do have a resource online right now called Decision Diagnosis and Decision Making for Any Bluegrass Weevils. This has been put out by the Gulf Coast BMP project, and it's available as sort of an ebook online right now. And we've got instructions in here for doing soapy flushes, vacuum sampling, as well as using linear pitfall traps. So it covers everything from degree days to timing and decision making as well. So yeah, this is a tough time to put new practices into your management scheme that you haven't done in the past, but any ability to get out there and get a sense for where weevils are at now will buy you some time and give you a good heads up for later on if you are going to make a management decision. So Carl, I don't know if you had many poll questions or responses come back for that adulticide poll, but I would be curious to know, we're starting to see a shift of guys looking at maybe doing larvicides instead of adulticides now, if they really can't get a crew out to do much management right now. But yeah, I'd just be curious to see what the responses are there.
Yeah, so we got a 50-50. Half did apply adulticide, half didn't. And then we just ran the poll question for timing. So it looks like about 60% of people scout, about 40% of people use phenological indicators, the forsythias, 32% use growing degree days, and then 18% use other. So, and that was a question where they could select multiple answers if they wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great to hear that scouting, people are looking to scout. There we go. I'm seeing the results up there now. So
Yep.
Yeah, scouting. I'd be curious to see what kind of scouting folks are doing. I know some people are really married to soapy flushes. I think you can cover so much ground with vacuum sampling if folks can get on board with that. So we try to give as much detail as we can in that ebook on how to start doing vacuum sampling. And we have a link to our webpage too for how to make cheap vacuum basket to put in your sampler to use for that. Because that's the one thing you're not going to have when you buy the vacuum sampler. So.
Yeah.
As far as phenological indicators go, yeah, again, in central New York, we're seeing really very little activity. We're seeing daffodils push, but yeah, as far as forsythia goes, we tend to think of full bloom of forsythia when adults become active. The majority of adults become active, and then half green, half gold of forsythia being when adults are in peak activity out towards the playing surface edges. So we've got a ways to go for leaning on phenological indicators for that. And that's coinciding with our scouting data too. As far as degree days go, I know some people, about 32% mentioned they use growing degree days. We're typically looking at about anywhere from 120 to 150 for peak adult activity. And we're still in double digits in most places that I've seen in New York State. So again, even if you're leaning just on growing degree days, the signs should be telling you it's too early for that as well.
So we do have one question from Ted, and it was a good question. Actually, Frank and I were talking about this back and forth. He's asking if, would you recommend doing a glory lap, he calls it, around natives or natural areas to stop the adults from entering the shortcut turf? I know you did some work a while back with the overwintering research and different methods of control there. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so we did look at some management practices within sort of grassy natural areas. And basically it was looking at mowing and use of herbicides, and then whether or not we left the dead residue and clippings there or we removed them. And essentially none of the practices that we looked at in those grassy areas improved our control of annual bluegrass weevil, but some of the practices we used made it worse for how well they overwintered. So when we left residues in those natural areas, after mowing them or treating with herbicide, we got much better winter success for the annual bluegrass weevil. So a significant increase in the overwintering success of the adult weevils. So, but that being said, back to the point of the trying to confine them to those areas to prevent them from coming out, that's a good question. And but one challenge we have is that a lot of the annual bluegrass weevils are overwintering in other areas. So they're overwintering in roughs. There were a bunch of warm-ups that we had this winter where I was out vacuuming just for curiosity's sake and finding weevils active outside of the natural areas kind of scattered. So it's not to say they're everywhere all the time, but it does seem like this particular winter we had kind of activation of weevils in different spots around the courses to get them out of those natural areas, or maybe they overwintered outside of it to begin with. So I wouldn't look at it as though it would give you a really good confinement strategy by any means. So, but that's a great question.
Yeah, so a good question there from Ted. And then we got another one in from Dave. Any thoughts on using wetting agents or mineral oil instead or with traditional adulticide apps? So I think the mineral oil, probably referring to Civitas. And I know you've got some answers there probably.
Yeah, so Ben McGraw had done some work on that, and I'm not real clear on the benefits it's going to bring. There's been some evidence that it kind of has a smothering effect on it. But again, I'd say right now, any thoughts of any type of combination treatments like that are still way out. I think that the best thing we can think of in a situation like this is, if we're going to invest any time at all, try to do it in scouting to get yourself a better heads up on what's to come.
Kyle, I was looking at the growing degree days on the forecast website. Carl, I'm going to take the screen again here for a second, just to draw everybody. Can you see the growing degree day model there, Kyle?
Yeah, got it.
So this is growing degree day accumulation as of a couple of days ago, and your 120 to 140 is looking like it's just creeping into Delaware this week. I'm sure there's better data than this. We'll update this, I would imagine, any day. I think it's today or tomorrow. This will get updated. And then I also draw your attention to we also have the forecast here. So my first question is, before I get to the forecast, we use March 15th. Is that the baseline you guys use in scouting?
We've been using March 1st for ours. That doesn't mean that's when we started our monitor, but yeah, March 1st. March 1st is the start for us.
Okay, and, so let's look at the forecast, and we're only expected throughout the entire region over the next week to get single-digit accumulations.
Yeah.
So this is what you mean by early, based on the weather, even in the metro areas that might be listening, where the pressure is intense.
Yeah, the last post that I had seen had the highest degree day accumulation in that area, I think, was still like between 50 and 60 so far. So yeah, we're just at about half of what we're looking to accumulate before we see peak adults. So yeah, that people should be taking that as a really good sign that nothing needs to happen yet.
That's right. And hello, if your target is the adult, it's not that the adults are overwintering. They have to come out of the canopy. Even if you're using things like Civitas or any pyrethroid, there has to be that contact. And it just makes sense that if you're going to get a good shot at it here, and keep in mind too, right? Let's keep in mind, by all estimates, by whatever news people you subscribe to, we're looking into June for this, right? Think about the traffic and stress you're not going to have. Hopefully not going to have from the traffic and mowing and all the things you have to normally do. So put that in your calculus, as well as the fact that the weather's saying early, the target's telling us early, the scientists are telling efficacy is early. Let's not wait for another shoe to drop before we start sort of, hey, here's what we're going to do with regard to this.
Kyle, I got another question about scouting. So for people who maybe haven't done it before, I know we talk a lot about asynchronous populations in ABW, and on one area of the course, you might see adults, and another area you might not. How many areas, I guess roughly, or have you seen that there's a wild amount of variation in this, but how many areas on a golf course should you be scouting for, whether you're doing the soapy flushes or the pitfall traps?
That's a great question. I mean, normally I tell folks scout as much as you possibly can initially to get a sense for where things are at, and then narrow it down from there. But you got to do something pretty intensive up front. That's a pretty tough recommendation to be making right now, obviously. So I would say if all you can do is get out a little bit, go to those areas you've had some historic damage from, and you tend to have chronic problems. So that's a really good place to start. And if you can sneak any other areas in there, if you have some likely areas that have good looking overwintering habitat, I know that's kind of hard to define, but areas with a lot of accumulated leaf litter, sort of that good buffering environment, those are good sites to hit up as well. The reason we typically argue for vacuum sampling is because the amount of time you lose going and checking areas out is much lower with those. You're not sinking a ton of time into the scouting. It's just the initial investment in getting the vacuum sampler and setting the thing up. So Typically, when I go and scout a new area, I can make those passes between a native area and a fairway, for example, in about an hour, and I've got a pretty good sense for what's going on. So that's where a method like that, you're not feeling the pain of sinking too much time in just one thing for one insect. You know, it can be pretty quick. And I think the feeling with soapy flushes, unless maybe I'm just bad at them, but I think that those tend to feel like you're investing a lot more time when you do a method like that. So in a typical season, I'd say as much as you possibly can on your course if you don't have a good handle on it yet. But if you have a pretty decent sense, go back and hit up those areas that you know tend to have damage, because that's at least going to tell you in general, where things are on your course.
And again, you know, a lot of times, Kyle, I've heard you tell me and I think even Dan Peck and his graduate student, Didi at the day, and then Masa after that, didn't they find sometimes populations were just as high in the center of the fairway, but there was no damage? The damage has always been really associated where there's some other persistent stress that the grass is struggling from. There's a fair amount of populations and feeding stands can handle when there's not that stress. So again, that also has to be part of the calculus. Now, I always worry because I've chatted with Ben in the past, and he said, yeah, I still like the adulticide. I don't like the larvicide strategy only. What about the guys that have done that in the past with success and now are considering, wow, this is beautiful. I don't have to worry about this at all, and I can start my salt things later. What about that cohort and the concern that by not doing an adulticide, it allows that population to get enormous?
Yeah, I think there's that's a really great topic, and there's some good and bad to that strategy. You know, the good is obviously we're getting around the challenges of how difficult it is to make a decision for like properly timing adulticides, and especially in places where we've got pyrethroid resistance that known to happen. And I have seen some courses switch to larvicides only. Those tend to be courses where they don't have raging populations all over, but they've had pretty good success with it. Now, they are also courses where they're scouting regularly for both adults and larvae. So that's something that I think you absolutely need to do if you're going to try and switch to a strategy like that. But the risk with it is certainly that if you don't have that timed perfectly well, having not done the adulticide earlier puts all your eggs in that larvicide basket, and which is always a challenge with such a cryptic and small insect. So
right. And I guess what I would say is intimately knowing where people are doing this strategy because of resistance.
Yeah.
Then it becomes, well, what is my adulticide choice now that I think Dursban, to be honest, Kyle, I don't know Dursban yay or nay, but I know even our Long Island folks now have Acelepryn. So can you chat for a minute about what having this new tool does or doesn't do to their decision making now?
Yeah, it certainly gives us another option on Long Island for doing a preventative application for larvae. So that's something that in the past, if you were going to do that, you had neonics or nothing for preventative. So if you were struggling with managing adults and then wanted to switch to managing larvae, you had to focus on a curative application much, much later on Long Island when larvae are emerging from the stems. So that's even riskier because it's like the last chance once those larvae are out of the stem and in the soil. But having the diamides in the mix there now gives another tool in the box for trying to insert some kind of a preventative effort that's not just a neonic for trying to get systemic uptake and then control once you've got larvae hatched in the stems. So that is another option that's there, which is certainly helpful, especially if we think about the potential to lose products like some of our organophosphates that are also used in rotation for adulticides. So we're kind of losing one and maybe gaining another. So
okay, well, lots of thinking ahead for this. I think this is something we're going to be revisiting pretty regularly as guys are starting to plan. So Kyle, it sounds like the message from you for today is we got time. Use this time now to look around and understand how the populations are moving. And I keep thinking that, you know, we have to be a lot more precise than we've had to be in the past because of our lack of workforce and you know, and having to only be able to get in to do what is essential. And you'd say that something endemic like this on Long Island or down in the metro area for sure, and hot spots throughout the Northeast, that having that precision is going to be better this year, and that's only going to come from looking around.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, again, I totally know it's a tough thing to add something else to the list, but if you are looking to do something, that's what you should be doing right now. So hopefully, and what you said about precision, you're totally right. I think in some cases that freaks some people out and say, well, if I can't do this in this incredibly precise way, then it's not going to be useful for me to try it. But so I do think that there's some simple ways that scouting can be started on courses, and you can get a decent sense for what's going on without feeling like you're taking on this new massive task that has too many moving parts. So that's what we're hoping that BMP document can help clarify for some folks.
Yeah. So, Frank, I don't have any more questions. I'm sure once we get into the thick of the growing season, we'll probably have more. And Kyle, we'll probably invite you back on when the time is right there. But thanks again for today, stopping by and chatting for a little bit. Thanks to everyone again for attending. We've gotten a lot of great feedback from these. So again, as always, we'll post this on YouTube as a recording. And we'll see all those who are interested in tomorrow's our Sports Turf Talk. We'll have Bill Kreuzer on actually to talk about growth and PGRs for those who didn't get to.
Turf. That's a real focus on higher cut turf, right? Because the sports guys and the grounds guys are interested in what happens if I'm mowing 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and golf guys haven't started thinking about how they're going to manage their rough yet from that. And it's a very different discussion when your grass isn't actively growing. So again, big thanks to Kyle. Thanks, Carl. Kyle, thanks for joining us.
Yep, thanks for having me.
We're going to have you back as long as it's convenient. So it's pretty convenient for everybody when they're sitting around the house, but you got a youngster around, so that adds to the interest. So good luck to all of you out there working. Work safely. And look for those resources to make sure you can work safely, keep you and your crew safe. That's got to be job one. And these are really just designed to help you make decisions about a lower priority at this time. I don't want to say a non-priority, but a lower priority at this time. Keep yourself safe and do what you can to minimize what being out there. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Guys.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.